Hello, everyone. I'm Traci Arieli, end-of-life doula and founder of Comforting Closure. Today's episode is a special one. I'm honored to introduce two fellow death doulas, Kacie, Gikonyo and Mikey, Marin. Kacie is the founder of the Death Doula Collective, which both Mikey and I are part of, and the Death Doula School. She's a registered nurse, and her work in educating and supporting death doulas has been influential in changing the narrative around death. Mikey is the founder of the Healing Hearts House. She's not only a certified counselor and death doula, but also an advanced Reiki practitioner. Her holistic approach provides comprehensive support to individuals and families navigating the end of life. Together, we're answering your questions. Welcome, Kacie and Mikey. Thank you so much for being here. One of the things I love about our collective is that we're a diverse group of death doulas. Each of us has our passions and we approach our practices differently. So let's start off by telling our listeners a bit about why we're death doulas and what we like to focus on. So Kacie, why don't you begin?
Yeah, absolutely. So, as you mentioned earlier, I'm a registered nurse, and I've actually worked in long-term care, skilled care, acute care, memory care. So, pretty much people that were at the end of their life, either due to a terminal illness or because they were aging out. Um, I always kind of excelled in the realm of death and dying. I was always really good with it, working hand in hand with hospice and really helping people to kind of leave this earth comfortably, but also while supporting their loved ones. I was actually working as an infection control nurse during COVID. And that was kind of really just wild, to say the least. But I saw so many people die in such a small amount of time, and they died these deaths that were really just terrible. They weren't beautiful deaths, and they weren't able to say goodbye to their family, and there was nobody there to be with them. And I almost became hyper focused on trying to help these people die better. I eventually kind of got out of nursing after the whole COVID thing, and I knew that I had to do more in the realm of death and dying, but I wasn't really interested in working in the role of a traditional nurse and going into hospice. So I wanted to figure out what I could do that would provide more support, but be a little bit different than, what a registered nurse does. And I kind of stumbled upon, the death doula role and the death doula training. And, when I read what a death doula was, a death doula helps somebody labor out of this world. It just kind of, like, that's what I've already been doing. Like, this is absolutely my path. And so that's kind of what led me to opening my own company as a death doula.
So, hi, I'm Mikey, and I started the Healing Hearts House only a year ago, but I have been an advanced Reiki practitioner for a number of years, and I did have my own business doing that. And I provided a lot of comfort care to animals, to elders, to anybody who was suffering with pain or surgery, and responded really well to Reiki and provided a lot of comfort during hard times. And I wanted to do something more with it. And I myself am a cancer survivor, and I was in a Connect Through Cancer group, and I had heard about a death doula. I'm like, what is that? And it was on the West Coast. So I kind of had that seed planted in my head. And through COVID, I was helping a lot of people with Reiki. I was helping a lot of people with comfort care and trying my best to provide a service where I saw a need for one. And through COVID, I saw a lot as well. So I decided that was it for me. And I was going to go and pursue my certification and become a death doula and really focus on helping people have as much peace and comfort and serenity during the death and dying process. And it was just a beautiful opportunity for me to combine my background as a social worker and a counselor, as well as a Reiki practitioner, and to just look at death differently.
So my interest in becoming an end-of-life doula was influenced by a suicide of a close family member. I saw how it affected my family and how the community reacted. And I'd love to say that the community was really compassionate, but because there's such a stigma to suicide, it was many people weren't kind. And because of that, I really didn't want other families to go through the same thing or anything similar. And so I heard about becoming an end-of-life doula and becoming a grief coach. I went through my end-of-life doula training and went through other training for grief coaching. And so that's really one of my big focuses is on grief coaching. And I also love to focus on the planning aspect of death. And that is, the advanced planning, the advanced directives, and the whole host of other things that are tied to that.
Absolutely. I think it's amazing, like you said, the different background that we all have and the different things we can bring to the table.
Yeah, it is very interesting. So my first question that I actually wanted to review is what role does a death doula play in the end of life care?
That is a really good question. I know for me, I think we are a great addition to hospice. We are a great addition to the care team. I think people don't realize how intense it is when somebody is dying and they have 6 months or less to live and they are receiving a diagnosis like that, or they are just at an age where it is, time for them to leave this earth. And it is all hands on deck. And depending on the end of life planning, the finances, and what care that individual may need. I think that a doula can really be a practical addition to the team. We are non-medical, so we are not hospice. We need hospice. We cannot do, in my opinion, the death and dying process in a humane way, depending on the illness and the disease. Without them, they provide so many amazing resources, but they don't do what we do. We provide so much support as far as spiritual, emotional, the planning, the practical, the logical, and we can be there. A misconception a lot is that hospice is going to be there 24/7, or that a nurse is going to be there holding your loved one's hand. That's just not the case, and that is shocking to most. And in my practice, I find that most people are the clients that reach out to me anyway are around my age in their 40s, and they have full-time jobs, they have young children, and now they have parents or a loved one in their family that is diagnosed with a terminal illness, and they need help, and they are overwhelmed, and hospice isn't equipped, or nor do they know how to do all these things. And I think it's amazing that we can connect folks to attorneys that are end of life estate planning and wills and all that kind of thing, as far as insurance, trying to figure out long-term care, short-term care, just basically a full comprehensive look at the individual, the family, and how we can best serve them so that we can offer the best death possible. I know that sounds strange, but just like our labor and delivery doulas help folks labor into the world, it is our job to help labor out. And we provide so many other assets to the table, legacy projects, just anything and everything that we can help support that individual and their loved ones ease out of the world the best we can.
Yeah, I love that you bring up the surprise that people feel when they realize that, or when they're told that the hospice team might or might not be there when the person passes away. And I have spoken to hospice nurses. In fact, there was a hospice nurse that was on this program that said they are so busy that they just do not have time. They have to see 15 other clients or patients that day, so they don't have the time, unfortunately. And they don't, they wish they did, because that's why they got into and they got into what they're doing. But it's the reality of the thing. Also, I like that you brought up the planning part of it. I think part of what we do is education also. So I like working with people who aren't close to death, but are thinking about, okay, I need to start planning for this. I work with estate attorneys also, but I work with people who they're looking at their advanced directives. They realize that if something were to happen to them, they need things really easy to get to. As an example, they have all of their social media, their passwords. Well, how do family members get to that? How do family members know what banks they have, and a whole host, their utilities, what their account numbers are? And so I'm working with people who are our age and even younger, who are like, okay, let's put this all together. So if something happens to me, it's my family can focus on themselves versus focusing on trying to, call the utilities or trying to call the banks and do that work. It'll all be taken care of. So, and the education, the grief education, and really getting out there in the community and saying, okay, what is grieving? What does a good death look like? So that's, I love doing that. And I know that Kacie, you're a really big advocate in that, in education.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, part of the biggest things that death doulas do is educate, right? Because when you educate people about stuff that's going to happen, it takes a little bit of the fear and the anxiety away. And that's a lot of what is happening in a death end of life situation. People are afraid of death, but they're afraid of it just because they don't know much about it, and because they're scared because they have these ideas or these thoughts about what that could look like or what it could be like. And a lot of times, it's not right. The thoughts or the anxieties that they have can really be worked through. I love the way that Mikey described what a death doula is. I mean, she really hit the nail on the head with everything. It is a huge shock to everybody when they realize that hospice is going to come into the picture, 1 to 2 hours a week, a hospice nurse, and then an aide, 1 to 2 hours a week as well. So all of the other hours in a week are going to depend solely on whoever else is a caregiver. So I love to kind of come in before people are even hospice appropriate to really educate about that, about everything end of life related and end of life planning, but also what is hospice? What is this going to look like? And is that going to be enough support? Because a lot of times people just kind of fall into that and all of a sudden you're there and you're in the thick of it, but we can plan for that before we get there. So, if you don't want your family members to be your sole caregivers, let's plan for it ahead of time. And by the time we get hospice on board, we'll have some other caregivers coming in too, so that there's relief for the family, so that the families can just be together and spend time with each other and reduce a lot of the stress. So yeah, and I have a huge passion for educating. As a nurse, I held the director of education role, so it was part of my job not only to educate all of the nursing staff. I was educating doctors on infection control policies and all of that stuff, but also every single staff member that worked in the building. So, when it comes to educating, I have a passion for educating everybody about death and dying. But I have, these little intricacies. I love educating death doulas and helping death doulas to kind of grow and be the best that they can be, so that we're all out there providing the best care possible.
Thank you. Next question. What are some common misconceptions about death doulas?
That we're here to kill your loved one. I think they think hospice and death doulas are here to all right, let's give you some kind of medication and get you on out. That's sort of the reception I have received. If I don't know, they're like, wait, what? What do you do?
It's a very
Oops,
Go
sorry.
ahead,
A lot of
Kacie.
times I think that people don't understand. Well, people don't understand what hospice is. So as soon as you say you're a death
Right.
doula, they're like, well, that's ridiculous. I'll just call hospice. Okay, well, what does that mean to you? When you say you're going to call hospice, what do you think hospice is going to come in and do? And when you really kind of draw out how much support hospice is able to provide, because like you said, they're juggling 15 other families, not just yours, so people all of the sudden kind of can see oh, I guess there is a little bit of a gap there, a little bit of room for more additional support.
Right.
Yeah, I've worked with many families that their kids who are around our age hire me, and it's a big surprise to the parents when I walk in, because they have no idea why I'm there or what I do. And when I say I'm an end of life doula, it's really scary to them. It's a lot easier for someone our age, right? Because we're not as close to dying, hopefully. But with people who are in their 70s, 80s, 90s, it's a very difficult conversation, and it's really scary. So, and they do feel like we're there to plan their death. We're there to we're planning for it, and it's an interesting conversation. That
Oh, there's also a big misconception that when you talk about death and dying, you will then die. So that's another
Yes.
thing where people are like, these death doulas are crazy. They're out here just talking about death all the time, like we're wishing it or hoping it upon us or upon anybody else. But, that's obviously a very big misconception. Talking about death isn't going to kill you or make you die. It's just going to help you to die better whenever your time actually gets here.
Yeah, I think a lot of it is like generational too. I think like the folks we worked with that are like 70, 80, 90, it's just such a taboo topic. They're not going to necessarily have this big paradigm shift. But once we're there a day or so, I find they soften completely. They typically call me their helper. My helper's coming. My lady helper's coming. They don't know what the heck to call me sometimes, but they love I'm their favorite. They look forward to the time we really talk about their life. We do these life reviews and legacy projects, and once like they spend some time in the warmness and we're really not just in and out and we're really there to help them, and it's just a pillow here and there and read some poetry, whatever their needs and desires are, and meeting them just where they are. So much is just being thrown at them, and it's just nice, like, and I feel like they do soften, and then they, whether they call us a death doula or an end of life care specialist or whatever term, they seem to really appreciate it, and they seem to at the end be safe and comforted by the process and the experience that we provide. They, in my experience, that's what I see. It's just, I think, a generational thing for them.
How do death doulas collaborate with healthcare professionals like hospice staff?
I'll take this one. I can tell you that for me, it was really important to get in front of hospice as a death doula to make sure that hospice understood what death doulas are, because I think that at first there was a little bit of a stigma there from hospice because they had no idea what we were doing or what we are. And we kind of just burst out onto the scene like, hey, we're death doulas. We're here to help people die too. So for me, it was really important to get in front of hospice and say, like, here's who I am, here's what I do, and here's how we beautifully work together. And in that way, we are able to beautifully work together. So the way that I say it is, a death doula does not replace hospice in any way, and hospice doesn't replace a death doula in any way either. Right. It's just when you work with a death doula and hospice, you're kind of adding another member to the care team. And the more members of the care team you have, the higher level of care you're going to receive. So why wouldn't you want the additional support?
Yeah. Also, I've when I work with people who are and they bring me in and I meet their hospice team has my information, and I have received calls saying, Traci, can you go over and check on so and so? Can you let us know how they're doing? Because that relationship with that person and that family you become really close. So it's not only you're an extension of the hospice team, but you're also an extension of their, and I'm not going to say their family, but you become really close to them. And there's a significant level of trust that is built.
Yes, 100%. We're there from before, like most of us do advanced care directives or advanced directives, whatever terminology your state prefers. But, we're meeting with people, we're planning ahead of this. And then the unimaginable happens, they receive a diagnosis, and we're there. I mean, I'm there with my patients typically pretty much every day, like, or every other day when they are, 3 months or less. I'm pretty much there every day. And I am like, they're pretty much a social worker. And I'm always very close. Another thing for me, a connection to hospice, I am very close with the hospice social workers. They know I have a social work background. They are social workers. They can spend maybe 1 hour a week. Again, their caseload is crazy. So they're like, I know this woman, her name is Mikey. She's a death doula. Here's her brochure. Here's her card. Call her. She will help. And they do. And my phone, I get probably 4 to 5 phone calls a week, if not more, just from referrals. Hey, I was told by this hospice social worker to call you. I don't even know what you are. Are you an aide? Do you do that? And I have to, and explain what I do. And they're like, that's amazing. Oh my God, we would really love you. I don't know if we're quite there yet, but in a few months, we would love to have your help. And it's really interesting to have those opportunities to educate and to just be an extension of hospice or vice versa.
How do you manage compassion fatigue and care for your own emotional well-being when constantly faced with intense and heavy situations? Yeah, one of the things I found, my original background is I worked in the tech field. I'm located in the San Francisco Bay Area, and so for a number of years I worked as a program manager in the tech world, and I remember when I started my career as a death doula. One day I was sitting doing some work, and I felt really, that compassion fatigue. I felt exhausted, and I said, okay. And it was just some marketing stuff I was working on, but I was like, okay, I'm going to get up and go for a walk. And I remember thinking to myself, I would never do this when I was working in the tech world. There's no room for that. And realizing that part of my job is self-care. Part of my job right now is making that time for self-care. And so what that looks like to me is like I have 3 non-negotiables. And I know I've talked to both of you about this. My 3 non-negotiables are, I have to meditate every single day. I have to get some exercise every single day. And I need to spend time with my husband, Oren, every single day. And those are my 3 non-negotiables, and I schedule those in and I make time for them. Of course, sometimes, death happens. So you only have so much control. But it is that's part of my job. It is as important as the marketing and the other parts of my job.
Yeah, 100%. I'm the same way as a spiritual person. I take on a lot. I am an empath, and I use my Reiki, I use my energy, and it's not, I don't necessarily carry it with me. I know how to have healthy boundaries, but it's just like that. I yoga every day. I have to eat right. I have to sleep. My phone goes do not disturb by 7 p.m. and you really can't get a hold of me. I'm pretty good with my boundaries, and I spend my family time. When I'm home, I'm home. I'm pretty unavailable to the world unless you're actively dying. Then I'm on call, 24/7 for you. But yeah, those are my self-care time, and I have to do it so I can show up and be available for them and give my all.
Yeah, I love how you said that self-care is part of the job, because that is just a great way to put it. It literally is part of the job. You absolutely have to make sure that you take care of yourself, or you will not succeed at this job. And I also, I schedule time into my schedule, or block off time on my schedule that is for me to be alone and have self-care, so I have younger kids at home. So I do what I call CEO time, and my CEO time is on Mondays, because on Mondays the kids go back to school, and before I hit a full week of work, back to back meetings and stuff, I need time for myself to really center myself and be happy with myself and to feel calm and comfortable before I hit the week running. So that's kind of part of what I do for self-care. I agree with Mikey. You have to have good boundaries. So I do have times where kind of my phone is off, except for, clients who I need to be there for. But, I've found that I was always kind of groomed to believe that you had to answer everybody right away, because we've had cell phones and we've had this immediate access to everybody. And in the last year or so of really kind of drawing those boundaries and taking that time where I don't have to answer and I don't have to respond, it's almost empowering in a way to kind of take control of your life in such a manner. So.
How can society better support individuals and families facing the end of life?
Oh, I wish we had more time. I just do not love that. What is it, 3 days? You know what I mean? Somebody loses their mother and they're like, okay, back. I really think as a society, I wish, the reason we're so scared of death is that we don't have our elders dying at home anymore, and our children and ourselves, we don't see it the way we used to up close and personal. And that makes it a mystery, and everybody's scared of it. So I think by the doulas and hospice and people educating and talking about it and removing the stigma, that's step one. And allowing, in my opinion, space for grief and time, and holding space as a culture, and bringing casseroles over and just sitting with a loved one, checking in like that. We don't do any of that, and it's really a shame, really a shame. Even when my patients or my clients, whatever we call them, they pass, I'm like, we're not calling hospice right away. We're not calling the funeral home. Let's just be here and feel, this is heavy. This is hard. Let's be here, and it's just, okay, we don't want to talk about it. We don't want to see it. We want to put makeup on this body, throw it in a casket, make it look nice, and be at work on Monday. And I just think that that's, as a society, we can do a whole lot better.
Yeah, I totally agree. Oh, I think that changing the narrative around death and dying is the most important thing that society can do for every single one of us. Every single human being on the entire planet is going to die someday. And to be so quiet about it and so uneducated about it is just almost silly. So I think that, one of the most important things that society can do is really embrace that change and embrace that education and embrace the role of the death doula, because, we're really the ones who are here to be the most helpful during that time.
And I get asked a lot, what can I do as a family member, or what can I do as a friend or a coworker? How can I support my friend? How can I support my loved one when they're going through such grief? And it is just be there. Let them talk about their loved one. Ask them how they are, but ask them to talk about their, do you want to talk about, your father who just passed away? What was he like? One person that I read her book and I really love her. It's a book called Bearing the Unbearable. Dr. Joanne Cacciatore, she wrote something, we say their names, we write their names, and remember them so that they can continue to matter in this world. And I think that quote really, it says it all. We want our loved ones to continue to matter. And so just talking and just listening to the person who's grieving is really important and significant.
You're so right. And we, to kind of piggyback on that, there's a, quote that we die twice, once when we physically die, and the second time when they stop saying our name. Same with that doctor. I know she says that in that book, and it's exactly that. So let's keep them alive. We're always thinking, you're not going to upset the person by bringing them up. They're already thinking about them. They want to talk about them. You're so right about that.
Can you share a memorable experience that you've had as a death doula?
Kacie, you go with this one first.
All right. I've had many, many memorable experiences as a death doula, but one of my favorites, a lot of times as people reach their last days of life, where they enter the active dying phase, they're not usually very coherent. There's a lot of sleeping, and even during the awake times, they're not really very aware of what's going on. I had one client in particular who was just the most alert and the most aware up until like an hour before she died. And the thing that kind of made it great was that she was ready to go. She was really, truly at peace with death. We had worked together for 8 months and we had shared all of her life review. We had done a beautiful legacy project together. We had talked about her diagnosis. We had created this incredible death plan. We had done everything perfectly, to the point that she was like, perfect, like, let's do it. Like, I'm done, I'm done here. And she was ready to go. And I remember, you can tell by sometimes the vital signs and the looks of the body when somebody is nearing death. And so, we had talked to hospice, and they sent the chaplain in, and they were reading some, hymns and things out of the Bible for her. And then the lady said, do you have any questions for me? And she was like, yeah, how do I die? Like, how do I do this? Like, I'm ready. Like, I'm done, like, do you have like the actual like magic key that like lets me go? Because I'm ready. Like, I planned for it, and I talked to everybody, and I saw everybody, and I told everybody everything I needed to tell them. So for me, that was just a really incredible experience, because it's really interesting to see somebody be so alert until the very end, because it's not like that for the most part. But also for somebody to be so happily ready to go, because we spent so much time working together and getting all of the fears and the anxieties and everything out of the way.
That is awesome. My This one will always be the one I'll never forget. And it was recent, and it was a woman, and she was not very old. She was in her 60s, and she was a friend of mine, and it was her daughters who hired me to care for her. And she was just the best, like the best. And I feel like we gave her a really good death. She was given a tough diagnosis of glioblastoma, and it was brutal. And I knew we probably had a year when she had that diagnosis, and I was there with her for the last 3 months of her life. And she wanted to go to the casino one last time. I'm like, girl, and she couldn't walk. She could really hardly move her hands at this point. I knew she probably had like 48 hours left. And I'm like, I will make that happen. I will absolutely, with your consent and your daughter's consent and my social worker abilities and coordinating of buses and vans, and make it happen. And we did. And I could tell she was ready and scared, but no, I shouldn't say ready. She wasn't ready because she was too young, and she had kids and grandkids. So it was, that one was it pulled at our heartstrings. So that one took time and process. And I said to her, my words to her were, I know you're not ready. We're not ready. I'm going to get choked up over here. This one always gets me, but it's time. It is time. And you don't need to suffer anymore, because it was getting, she was suffering. And, we were giving her all the appropriate pain management medications, and hospice was giving her the morphine. And I knew it was time. So I said, I'll be right back. I ran out. I got the daughters and the sons and all of her family, got everybody there. I got a bunch of wine. I got pizza. I got ice cream, everything they wanted. And I opened the wine, and I had the most beautiful, we had amazing music, just amazing gospel music. We had the diffusers. We had beautiful ambience. I had a projector on the wall, and they all laid in bed with her, all her kids. And she waited till I held her hand, and I held her hand, and we all just held her as she took her last breath in that room. I have never seen another room filled with more love. And it was my honor and privilege to be there. And that's like, in my mind, that will always be the standard, because I just feel like we showed up for her and honored her the way she deserved. And I feel like everybody deserves what we give as doulas.
Thank you. One of my favorite and one of my first clients, I was brought in towards the end of his life, and he was in the den because he couldn't be in his bedroom. So he was lying in his den, and he was very quiet. And his family, of course, his children were there. His wife was there, just very quiet. And I came in to help with some respite work, and I sat down next to him and just started to talk. And he opened his eyes, and he was very weak. But we just started talking, and I started asking him questions. And when he found out, that I used to be, in the tech world, he came from the tech world. He started talking, and all of a sudden he had all this energy. He was such an engineer. And he just, he like all this energy. And then, he started talking about his entire life and how he became who he was, and his family, his children didn't even know of these stories. And so for like the last 2 weeks of his life, we met and we just had these conversations, and his family just came around just to hear this, and we recorded it. But the opportunity that I had to learn about him, one of the things I love about being with people is learning about them. And it was really significant to the family, and they learned so much about him. So that is one of my, something that I will always stick with me. Plus, it was one of the first people that I worked with. So that was, I felt very fortunate.
What a gift. What a gift you gave that family, truly. And the recordings of those stories, they never would have had that if you weren't sent there. So that's just incredible. What a gift.
Yeah, it is so important. You could write down, their stories. You could, I love recording the stories because and actually videotaping them also. because then you see the person. But it is a gift. It definitely is a gift. Let's see, what common fears do individuals express when confronting death, and how do you help them?
Most people are worried that they're going to be in pain. That's a really big fear that most people are worried about. Is death going to hurt? And death itself, I don't believe that it really hurts. I believe that the disease process, based upon what disease is actually killing you, is that, that is what is going to cause pain. And not everybody does die in pain. I've seen countless people die without ever needing to take any pain medicine from hospice, and kind of died comfortably. But some people do suffer some pain with a cancer diagnosis or other diagnoses. But I think that it's important to educate people that, even though you might have some pain related to your diagnosis or your disease process, it's not that it's going to be unmanageable. There is pain, but there's also medications that are able to treat the pain so that we can keep you comfortable. And that's just part of your death plan, is working that out. How important is it to keep your pain under control? Even if sometimes, you have to be a little sleepier because you have to take more pain meds in order to keep your pain under control. So it's something that I really just like to kind of educate people through and walk them through. Would you rather take less pain medication when you've got your family visiting so that you're more alert and more awake, but you'll be suffering from a little bit more pain? Or is that something that you're not interested in? Just kind of things that I like to really walk people through so that they understand, yeah, there might be pain, but here's how we're going to handle it. And let's handle it exactly how you want to handle it.
And I think it's education also, not only to the person, but to their family. When I'm doing a lot of the advanced directive work, we talk about, what everything means and what dying, what actually happens to your body. And so what is your quality of life? What do you want your quality of life to be like? And, many people, they think death is like what they see in the movies or what they see in TV, and it is not like that. So, what is the process of, how does a body die, and, what things, as an example, when a person is dying, at some point, they don't want to eat or drink, and their family members get really upset, but it's the body's natural way of shutting down. And if you try to, if you put in a feeding tube or you try to hydrate, that's really uncomfortable to a body that is dying and not wanting that. It's really uncomfortable. So it's the education process. And, Kacie, that's what I hear all the time. I hear that people are afraid of will it hurt? They're much more afraid of will it hurt than is there life after death? I hear is there life after death sometimes, but is it going to hurt is really the big one.
Yeah,
I think that's pretty much what I hear too. Yeah, that's number one. And I think like me, I don't know, because if maybe I do the Reiki and they have this whole like spiritual sort of experience, then that kind of opens up some bigger existential questions. And I do my best to process with them through it as best I can. But yeah, number one is always, is it going to hurt? And how can we deal with that?
Yeah, we should have one of these that just talks about all those spiritual things that we've witnessed.
It's wild.
Oh, how do you support individuals with unresolved issues or regrets as they near the end of life?
Ooh, that's a very good question. I feel like all of my clients and patients always tell me stories that like they've never told anyone. And it's really interesting. Sometimes they do. That's one of the questions I'll ask, like, what are your regrets? And it's so, my jaw is always on the floor with the stuff they say. And I think we just kind of process through them. We talk about them. We kind of talk about what different choices would you make? How do you think that would be different? If that would have happened, then we wouldn't have had these other events occur. So I don't know. We just sort of work our way through it as we're conversing. That's usually my approch.
And what can you do now? What
can they do now?
Yeah, like if I regret something that happened with a family member, what can you do now?
I really encourage amends. Like, I just think anybody, whether you are terminal or not, so like carrying secrets and carrying shame is just so heavy on the soul. And I feel like the good death is when the head and the heart are aligned and we are free and we're our most authentic selves and we are at peace with ourselves. And I don't think we can have that without amends. So if it's a healthy situation where it's not going to bring harm to the other individual emotionally and they're both parties are open, I really encourage, saying how you feel. What do you have to lose? Really, it's a zero-sum loss. Make amends.
I always like to say to hold non-judgmental space, right? So a lot of regrets that I've heard at the end of life are significant regrets, are things that people did wrong in their lives that they regret. And there are things that they haven't really told a lot of people before for fear of being judged. Because maybe some of the things they did really aren't great things. And so for me, I've had patients just be able or be so grateful to be able to talk about it and to get it out and to get it, it out of them and have somebody be there and understand and listen, but not really have any response, like not have any judgmental about what I think about that or how I feel or how I think you should have done things. None of that necessarily matters. I'm just here to hold space for you. I do agree with Mikey about trying to make amends if amends are possible. That is always a touchy subject because, of course, we never know what happened that caused this rift, and there's 3 sides to every story, right? So I do try to gingerly work around that, but if people are open to it, I will absolutely dive right in and get involved. And I will be the person who reaches out to another person, I'm so-and-so's death doula and they're interested and this is something you'd be interested in and whatever. And sometimes I can kind of buffer the harshness if there's a no, I'm absolutely not interested in that or whatever else. But that's what I've got to say about guilt, shame, and regret is just kind of being there for them to let them get it out so that it's not all stuck in there. And helping any way that you can, if you can. But sometimes just being there and listening and loving and non-judging is all the help that they need.
The number one regret, all surveys say this, that, they interview people and the number one regret is I've worked way too much and didn't spend enough time enjoying life. And, it's true. I mean, people, that's what they tell me when we get into these conversations, 9 times out of 10, that's the biggest regret that I hear. What do you guys hear?
I hear that, but I also hear that they weren't themselves. They weren't not, and I don't mean sexuality or anything like that. They just lived their life to please others. They followed this exact path to please their parents, to please their church, to do the societal next right thing. And there were so many other dreams and adventures and life that this individual wanted for themselves, and they never allowed themselves permission to play, to explore, to be themselves. Really, I feel like a lot of them, especially these older folks right now, have lived their entire existence, the females, taking care of a man, serving a man. It's interesting, a lot of regrets and interesting thoughts about that stuff.
Yep.
I agree. I hear the same thing. Obviously I work, should have worked less and played more, but that does get deeper, where people maybe stayed in an unhealthy relationship for a really long time because they thought that's what was best for their children, instead of doing what was best for them to make sure that they live their best life, always kind of making choices that were based upon what was best or better for other people as opposed to themselves. That is definitely another big regret. And also not being able to draw boundaries. A lot of people can't draw healthy boundaries with people about things. And because of that, a lot of stuff is kind of piled up and weighed on top of them. And they want to be mad at that person for kind of taking advantage of them or whatever else. But, really it was a matter of drawing some solid boundaries. Those things could have stopped at a certain point with those solid boundaries. But those are the biggest things that I would say I hear.
How can healthy individuals plan for their eventual end of life? Advanced directives. Everyone should have one as soon as you turn 18. People don't realize that when they send their children off to college, that because of HIPAA laws, it might get very difficult if something, God forbid, happens to their child, an advance directive, and talk about it with your family. It is so surprising to know what your brothers and sisters and your family members, what they want. I got into a conversation with my parents and my two brothers, and I was really surprised about how there's three siblings, me, my two brothers, how one sibling, how different our values were as far as it came to end of life and what we would want. So, but I would have never known this if we didn't talk about it. So having those conversations and planning for the unexpected.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
and
That's what everybody's getting for Christmas from me. My family's, everybody's getting an advance directive from me. So I agree.
yeah, not only our advanced directives and healthcare power of attorney, financial power of attorney, not only is all of that really important, but something else that I love to make people think about way, way, way ahead of time when you're healthy and hopefully nowhere near death is what it's going to cost you to die, the death that you want to die. So, I mean, if you're healthy now, you're in your 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, whatever. It's very common for people to plan for their retirement, and it's very common for people to plan for their funeral and after they die. But there is a piece of your life in between your retirement and after you die, and that is the end of your life. And what do you want that to look like? I mentioned earlier, do you want your family members to be your caregivers or do you not? I personally have three sons. When I am at the end of my life, I have money that I've set aside so that I can hire people to come in and feed me if I need to be fed, or change me if I need to be changed, or shower me if I need to be showered, so that my kids don't have to do that. They can just be with me and spend time with me and not kind of have those memories of having to be my caregivers. So these are things I really love to make people think of as soon as you possibly can think of them, because most people don't think of them at all until all of a sudden
No.
you're in the thick of it. And now what do? Now everybody's taking care of you because there isn't any other plan there. And a lot of times the money and the resources are there that there could have been another plan. There just wasn't, because like you said, we didn't talk about it, right? So talking about it again is kind of at the head of all of this. You want to talk about what you want your death to look like instead of not even thinking about it, so that you're able to plan for it in every single aspect, financially included.
I love that. All you have to do is ask yourself, do you want your children to bathe you and to change you? And if that answer is no, then you need to plan for it. So I love that, Kacie, that you brought that up. This one's an interesting one. What if my doctor disagrees with my end of life decisions? Have you guys run into that?
Get a new doc. I have run into some hospices or some physicians that are just like, they don't even know about hospice or palliative care. They're just like out to lunch. I'm like, no, this is not who we need being the quarterback of our situation here. Like, if you don't like same with hospice, if you don't like your hospice team, guess what? There's another one waiting. And a lot of people don't know that either. They just assume it's the one their doctor referred or the big major hospital one in your area. But we have choices, guys. At bottom line, we have choices, and you are not beholden to the doctor that you've had for the last 25 years. You can get different doctors.
Yeah, I like to say you only die once, because you do. You only die once. And when you're working with me, we are literally only accepting the absolute best care, and that is it. We will not put up with things that don't align with what your end of life goals and values are. Something else that's really important for people to realize is, you've seen that same doctor for 25 years, so you think that doctor personally loves and cares for you, but that doctor is giving you advice based upon contracts that they have, or what types of things are going to make more money, or how they're able to charge health insurance. A lot of times the healthcare system very, very, very unfortunately cares about money more than people. And so it's totally cool if you and your doctor don't agree. That's fine. It's no big deal, because the doctor doesn't matter in your death plan. You matter. And so exactly like Mikey said, whether it's the doctor, whether it's the hospice team, whether it's a home care aide, no matter what it is, if they're not meeting yours, mine, everybody's standards, then they got to go. We don't have time to put up with not the best.
Well, Kacie, Mikey, it's already been an hour. Can you believe that? It's been So great to have you on the podcast. Thank you so much for coming in. I know that all of us love being part of the community that's working so hard to reshape the narrative around dying and grieving. How can people get a hold of you if they want to reach out?
I am at Mikey the Death Doula on all of the things. You can find me there or at Healing Hearts House. You can interchange any of those and you can find me.
Yep, and I am Death Doula Kacie, Kacie, and you can find me on all social media platforms. My website is deathdoulakacie.com. I've got email, Kacie at deathdoulakacie.com. So I'm pretty easy to find at this point.
And I'll link out to both of your websites in the
Thank
description
you.
of this podcast. So
Thank you so much for having us.
You're welcome. I hope we can do this again soon.
Love it.
To our listeners, thank you for tuning into this conversation. Death and grief are challenging subjects, but they are also part of our human experience. Remember that you're not alone. There are people and resources available to support you, like End of Life Doulas. And again, thank you for joining us. If you have any questions, please comment below or reach out to me directly. And if you found this conversation to be helpful, please like, share, comment, and subscribe. This is Traci Arieli from Comforting Closure, wishing you peace and comfort in your journey. Until next time, take care.